Hey guys, tonight we're going to wander beneath the pale moonlight and step up to the towering walls of ancient Babylon. You can almost feel the dry desert air cling to your skin, while somewhere under your feet, unseen rivers carry their quiet. Conversations. The stars above are sharp pinpricks in the black sky, and the sandstone blocks ahead look like they've been standing here since the dawn of time, which in their opinion they have. If you were suddenly dropped here without sunscreen, clean water, or any sense of direction, you probably wouldn't last a day. And honestly, neither would I. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop me a comment with where you are right now and what time it is. I'm curious who's listening under what sky. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand before the walls, massive, honey-colored, and shimmering faintly in the moon's silver touch. They rise far above your head, 100 feet of stacked stone and baked brick, each block whispering its own story. Your fingers trace the cool surface, finding grooves worn not by time alone, but by the hands of countless people who have passed here. The air smells faintly of clay dust, warm from the day, now cooling into the still night. Somewhere, far off, a low splash echoes one of those hidden rivers below, reminding you it's still there, still breathing under the city. It's strange, isn't it? Babylon's walls were famous for their sheer skill. Ancient writers claimed chariots could race along the top to abreast, which sounds impressive until you realize they never mentioned how terrifying the drop would be on either side. The wall isn't just a defense. It's a statement, a line drawn between what's inside: order, wealth, the rule of kings, and the endless wilderness outside. And below, those secret waterways form a second boundary, invisible but just as important, threading under gates, and towers like veins in a living body as you walk. The moon catches on glints of mica embedded in the bricks, tiny stars trapped in stone. Your sandals scuff softly on the packed earth road, and you hear the gentle lap of water somewhere beneath, muffled by layers of brick and soil. Some say those rivers were part of a grand hydraulic system, feeding gardens and cooling courtyards. In summer, others whisper about hidden passages for escape or smuggling. Imagine hauling amphorae of wine through the dark, with nothing but the sound of water and your own heartbeat for company. Historians still debate whether the original builders intended the rivers as a secret defense, a sacred lifeline, or simply the best plumbing solution they could think of at the time. You picture ancient engineers with red pens and clay tablets, arguing over flow rates and water pressure like they were designing the first luxury spa. And maybe, in a way, they were. You pause at a section where the wall curves inward, a massive gate tower. The torchlight above flickers, casting long, slow-moving shadows that make the stone seem alive. Somewhere inside, a guard coughs deep bored, the sound bouncing off the masonry. You can almost hear him muttering about the heat, wishing for the cool relief of the rivers below, though he'd never admit it. After all, in this city, those waters belong as much to the gods as to men. The ground under your feet gives a faint, hollow note as you step there. Beneath that layer of compacted soil, the water flows. The thought makes your skin prickle. It's like walking over a secret heart, still beating in the dark. You can almost imagine it carrying not just water, but stories, memories, and maybe the occasional fish who's been lost for centuries. Poor thing, as you move along the wall, you notice faint carvings, half buried near the base, swirling lines like waves, small fish, and what might be the outline of a boat. Time has softened them, but they still hum with purpose, like a reminder to anyone passing by that life here has always been bound to the flow beneath. You stop, leaning back to take in the sheer scale of the wall again. Above, the guards' silhouettes pace like shadows in slow motion. The city behind those stones sleeps under the same moon you stand beneath, unaware that you're listening for the heartbeat below. Out here, the night wraps you in its quiet, the desert wind brushing past your ear with a dry whisper. Somewhere beneath, the river moves, impatient, eternal, and just a little smug about knowing more than any of us ever will. And you keep walking, step by step, tracing the curve of Babylon's moonlit skin, following the faint promise of water you can't see but can almost feel. A silent guide pulling you toward whatever waits beyond the next gate. The curve of the wall finally delivers you to the gate of Ishtar, and it's like walking straight into a dream painted in deep cobalt. Even in the dim moonlight, the glaze catches what little light there is and throws it back in muted blues and golds, as if the bricks themselves are quietly showing off. You tilt your head back, and the arch rises above you, impossibly tall, framed by towers on either side. Rows of lions, bulls, and dragons march in procession across the surface, each one picked out in pale relief. Their paws mid-step, their eyes watching you. They don't blink, which is somehow both impressive and deeply unsettling. The air here feels cooler, a faint whisper of dampness brushing against your skin. Somewhere beneath your sandals, the hidden water threads under the gate's foundations, as though the city's lifeblood insists on slipping through even its grandest thresholds. The sound is faint, less a splash, and more a hushed sigh, but it's there, seeping up from the stone. You imagine ancient engineers standing here thousands of years ago, proud of how the water would pass under without ever threatening the structure. And yet, some still claimed the river was deliberately drawn to flow here, to bless those entering and to cleanse those leaving. You run your fingertips along the glazed bricks. The surface is smoother than you expect, like touching a polished ceramic vase warmed by the day's heat. Between the figures, tiny rosettes fill the empty space, their petals still crisp after centuries. It's the kind of detail that makes you think about the artisan's hands stained with pigment, carefully pressing each molded tile into place while the sun beat down and the smell of wet clay filled the air. You wonder if they knew their work would be admired millennia later, or if they were just trying to finish before lunch. The Gate of Ishtar wasn't just an entrance, it was a declaration. Visitors, traders, and foreign dignitaries passed through here, dazzled by the artistry and scale before even stepping inside the city. It was part of the processional way, a grand boulevard that cut through Babylon, lined with walls of matching blue glaze. Picture a parade in full swing here, the sound of drums and flutes, the flash of polished shields, the air heavy with incense, and, beneath it all, the unseen murmur of the water underfoot, like the city humming to itself in contentment. Historians still debate the true order of the animals on the gate, whether the dragons symbolize the god Marduk leading the way, or if the lions claimed that honor. The bulls, for their part, seem like they're just here for the snacks. You squint at one particularly fierce-looking lion, and for a moment, in the flickering torchlight from above, you swear it shifts slightly. Probably just your imagination. Probably you step closer to the archway, feeling the cool shade it casts even at night. The hollow echo of your footsteps changes as you move beneath it, the sound stretching out as if the air itself is thicker here. You glance down and notice a faint seam in the paving stones, reminder that below this exact spot, water once flowed in a narrow channel. Some ancient travelers might have paused here to dip a hand into the stream for luck before entering, letting the droplets cool their skin. It's a small, human gesture, but one that connects you across the centuries as you pass under the gate. The street ahead narrows into the processional way, but you glance back one last time. From this angle, the gate looks like a fragment of the night sky itself, cut out and placed on earth. The blues are darker, the golds warmer, and the animals seem frozen mid-step, waiting for the next festival to start. The muffled rush of water beneath is still there, faint but constant, as if it refuses to be forgotten. You keep walking, your shadow stretching ahead in the lamplight, the faint scent of baked brick lingering in the air. Behind you, the gate. Of Ishtar stands silent, holding its secrets and its rivers close. A guardian both of stone and of water, both of the living and the memory of those who came before. And somewhere below, the current carries on, sliding through the dark, patient and unseen. As it always has, the processional way narrows, its walls leaning just enough to trap the scents and sounds of the night market ahead. You hear it before. You see Italo, warm buzz of voices blending with the rhythmic clink of metal scales, the thump of baskets being set down, and the faint trill of a reed flute drifting lazily over the crowd. The smell hits next. Grilled lamb sizzling over charcoal, fresh baked flatbread still puffed from the oven, and somewhere in the mix, the briny temps of river fish, which, if you think about it, is a little odd for a city in the middle of the desert unless you remember the hidden water beneath your feet. Lantern light spills from stalls like warm honey, pulling you toward the heart of the market. You weave between merchants with trays of dates stacked high like miniature towers, their sticky sweetness catching in your throat and potters showing. Off-water jars with delicate painted waves curling around their bellies. Every now and then you catch fragments of conversation, quick, hushed, and just a shade too cautious. They're not talking about the price of figs. One group of traders huddles near a stall selling dyed fabrics in colors so rich they seem to glow in the dark. Their voices dip lower as you pass. Words like channel, blocked, and south tunnel slide past your ears. You glance at the jars of indigo and crimson, but you know the real trade here isn't happening on the surface. Somewhere under these cobblestones, narrow waterways carry more than just water. You can almost picture clay amphorae bobbing in the dark, their cargo more valuable than gold. The market is loud enough that most people wouldn't notice the faint sound beneath it, all but you've been listening for it since the walls. Subtle undercurrent, like a long, deep breath, drawn slowly and let out again. It's the sound of the rivers moving beneath the city, threading under the market just as they do under the gates and palaces. Some say the merchants here have always kept one ear tuned to that sound, because when it changes, when the flow slows or quickens, it can mean the difference between feast and famine. Historians still debate whether the market's location was chosen for convenience, or if it was deliberately placed above a junction of the underground system so goods could be moved unseen. The idea of a water street under your feet isn't In fact, some elders claim that in the right season, you could drop a sealed jar into a certain inlet near the palace and have it pop up here within a day. That's some next-level delivery, service Babylon Prime, if you will. You stop at a spice stall where the air is thick with cardamom, cinnamon, and dried rose petals. The merchant, a wiry man with hands stained yellow from turmeric, leans in to murmur something about tonight's meeting to the woman beside him. They glance at you, then away, their smiles just a bit too quick. You buy a small packet of saffron you don't really need, mostly to make it look like you're just another night wanderer with a taste for expensive seasoning. Everywhere you look, there's a layering of worlds, the bright and noisy above, the quiet and shadowed below. The flicker of an oil lamp catches on the scales of a fish laid out on a slab, and for a second you wonder if it swam here through the black water channels, arriving just in time to be caught. Poor guy never saw it coming. As you move deeper into the market, the crowd thins. A group of children darts past, their laughter sharp and quick before vanishing into the maze. You find yourself in a narrow lane lined with basket weavers, their fingers moving with hypnotic precision. One of them hums softly, a tune you can't place, but that feels older than the city above. Maybe as old as the rivers themselves. You pause, listening. There it is again, the quiet, steady pulse of water beneath the stones. The market hums on above it, unaware or pretending to be, as deals are struck, secrets exchanged, and the city's lifeblood keeps flowing underfoot. You take one last look at the lantern-lit stalls, the colors, the smoke curling up into the night, before turning toward the palace district. Whatever runs beneath this city, it isn't just waterland. You're starting to think the people here know it better than they let on. You leave the market's tangled lanes behind, carrying the faint perfume of spices on your clothes. The palace rises ahead, its walls softer in the moonlight, the sharp lines blurred into something almost gentle. You pass under an archway guarded by carved lions whose stone eyes seem to follow you, not in a we're watching for trouble way, more in a we're bored, tell us something interesting way. The noise of the market fades, replaced by a hush broken only by the crunch of gravel under your sandals and every now and then the muted drip of water somewhere nearby. Step into the palace courtyard and the air changes. It's cooler here, heavy with the scent of jasmine and damp stone. Torches cast slow-moving reflections across the surface of a long, rectangular pool at the center. The water shimmers with liquid moonlight, so clear you can see the faint pattern of tiles beneath geometric designs in blues and greens, their edges softened by centuries. Your fingers itch to trail across the surface, but you hesitate, half expecting some ancient rule about touching royal water to still be in effect. The palace pools are no simple decoration. They were the heart of a cooling system that made Babylon bearable in the brutal summers. You can almost imagine the engineers' pride as underground channels guided water from the hidden rivers into these open basins, letting it evaporate and drop the air temperature. It's an elegant trick, like an ancient air conditioner, minus the electricity and the humming noise that would ruin the mood. Lesser known is that some of these pools were salted deliberately, creating mirrored surfaces that stayed undisturbed. In the wind, perfect for night reflections of stars and temples. You suspect the gods appreciated the view. You wander along the pool's edge, the stone cool beneath your palms. Here and there, small bronze spouts shaped like lion heads trickle water into the basin, the streams making tiny ripples that glide across the surface. You lean close and catch the faint gurgle from within the pipes, evidence of the constant, tireless flow beneath the palace. That sound has been here longer than the current rulers, longer than the bricks of the palace itself. Historians still debate whether these pools were purely practical or if they were also sacred, reflecting the heavens as a way to bring cosmic order into the king's home. Some argue they doubled as ceremonial washing basins before great feasts, while others think they were subtle status symbols, a quiet way of saying, yes, I can afford a body of water in the desert. Can you? A servant in a linen tunic slips silently along the opposite walkway, carrying a tray of pomegranates and figs. You watch as he stops at a smaller, circular pool tucked into a shadowed corner. The water there smells faintly of rose, and you realize it's not for cooling it. For bathing, you imagine the queen herself lowering into the scented water, the torchlight catching on jeweled anklets, her laughter echoing off the tiles. Somewhere below, unseen channels are at work, feeding the bath from the same lifeblood that runs under the city. There's something hypnotic about the way the torchlight and moonlight meet on the surface. The gold and silver waltzing together in slow, shimmering steps. You find yourself tracing the ripples until they blur into a gentle sway, like the waters breathing with you. A fish, how did it get here? Glides lazily past, its shadow stretching across the patterned tiles. Maybe it's a gift from the river, sent up through the channels as a reminder that no matter how fine the surroundings, the water's origin is older, wilder. Untamed, one corner of the courtyard opens into a colonnade, the stone columns wrapped in climbing vines. Beyond it, you glimpse another pool, this one smaller but deeper, almost black in the low light. The air there feels heavier, and the faint sound of chanting drifts from somewhere nearby. You can't quite see the figures, but the rhythm of their voices matches the quiet pulse of water flowing unseen beneath your feet. It's as if the palace itself is breathing through its pools. You take a seat at the edge, letting your fingers trail into the cool surface. The water wraps around them like silk, carrying the faintest vibration, a reminder of its journey from far-off sources you haven't yet walked. You picture its path, winding through underground channels, slipping past the market's foundations, brushing against stones worn smooth by centuries, until it surfaces here in the heart of power. And then, just as quietly, it will sink back underground and carry on. The night deepens, the air thick with the mingled scents of flowers and wet stone. Somewhere above, in a balcony you can't quite see, a lute begins to play a soft, wandering melody that catches on the water's surface and drifts out into the courtyard. You lean back on your hands, watching the reflections dance, feeling the steady, invisible heartbeat of the rivers beneath the palace. The city may sleep, but its waters never do, and you're beginning to understand they have their own story to tell. You leave the palace courtyard with the shimmer of water still on your fingertips, stepping into a narrow lane that smells faintly of incense and baked clay. The moon hangs low now, casting a silver path that leads you toward the unmistakable silhouette of the Temple of Marduk. Even from here, the ziggurat's tiers rise like a staircase for giants, each level shrinking upward until it disappears into the night sky. It's the sort of architecture that says, yes, we can reach the gods, and we'll do it with style. As you draw closer, the air changes again, heavier, warmer, with a deep, resinous sweetness that sticks in your throat. Priests move silently in their long robes, their faces half lit by the torches they carry. Each step you take feels muffled, like the street itself knows you're approaching sacred ground and is telling you to tread softly. The main entrance looms ahead, a massive doorway framed by glazed bricks the color of lapis lazuli, each tile etched with golden dragons and bulls that seem to shift when the light flickers. Everyone knows this temple is the center of the city's religious life, the place where Marduk, the chief god of Babylon, is honored with offerings, festivals, and processions. but few know about the quiet chambers deep within, where clay tablets are stored meticulous records of stars, omens, and, rather unexpectedly, detailed inventories of temple goats. Yes, even divine affairs have paperwork. You step inside, and the temperature drops. The light here is dimmer, coming mostly from shallow bronze dishes filled with thick, slow-burning oil. Shadows gather in the corners like they're eavesdropping. The air hums with a low, steady, chant-deep male voices repeating ancient words in a rhythm that could rock you to sleep if you weren't so busy trying not to trip on the polished stone floor. The main hall opens before you, vast and echoing. At the far end stands the statue of Marduk, towering above the altar. His eyes, inlaid with bright stone, seem to catch even the smallest light, giving him a watchfulness that's just a little unsettling. Gold leaf clings to the folds of his robe, and you catch the faint gleam of embedded gems. Someone clearly spared no expense on divine wardrobe. Historians still debate whether the temple's main rituals were primarily acts of devotion or strategic tools to maintain royal authority. Was the king genuinely kneeling in humility before Marduk, or was he making sure the crowd saw him as divinely endorsed? In either case, the incense is thick enough to blur the line between faith and spectacle. A priest passes close by, the hem of his robe brushing the floor in a whisper. He carries a small bronze bowl, the contents steaming faintly. You catch a whiff of cinnamon and something sharper, almost metallic. It's for the sacred fire at the altar flames that, according to tradition, must never be allowed to die. There's a lesser-known story that, once, during a particularly fierce storm, the fire nearly went out. The priests rushed to revive it using embers from a kitchen hearth, and afterward, the temple received an unusual offering, a set of new cooking pots, just in case. You move along the side of the hall, your fingers brushing the cool brick. Embedded in the walls are small plaques with inscriptions, some prayers, some warnings, and some reminders of temple rules. One particularly stern tablet advises against bringing unfit animals for sacrifice. You picture someone trying to slip in a scruffy, half-asleep goat and getting turned away at the door. A set of steps leads you upward, toward the higher terraces of the ziggurats. You climb slowly, each step narrower than the last, until the city spreads out below you. From up here, the Euphrates glints in the distance, the moon laying a pale stripe across its surface. The market, the palace pools, the winding streets, they're all miniature now, like pieces in a game only the gods can play. The wind catches your robe, cool and dry, carrying the faintest echo of drums from somewhere far below. At the top, the air is clean and sharp. A smaller shrine stands here, open to the sky. The priests believe it's where Marduk can descend more easily to hear prayers, though you can't help thinking it's also a perfect spot for stargazing. In fact, the temple's astronomers often work here, charting constellations and predicting eclipses. They claim it's divine knowledge, but you notice the way their eyes light up, like children spotting fireflies. Some joys don't need theological justification. You linger for a while, the city's heartbeat a distant thrum beneath your feet. The stars wheel slowly overhead, reflected faintly in the polished surface of the shrine's offering table. Somewhere below, the sacred fire burns steadily, its scent curling into the night. You feel a strange calm here, as if the weight of the stone beneath you is also holding your thoughts in place. And yet, when you finally turn to descend, there's a flicker of unease. The steps seem narrower in the torchlight, the wind a little stronger. You grip the wall, thinking half joking, half serious that, if you do trip, at least you'll tumble past some very historic scenery on the way down. When your feet touch the ground again, the temple looms behind you, silent and immense. The moon has begun its slow drop toward the horizon, and the streets ahead are shadowed and still. But you know the city isn't finished with you yet, not while the river keeps whispering its quiet invitations in the dark. You slip away from the temple's shadow, following a narrow alley that bends like it's trying to avoid being caught. The stones under your feet are warm from the day's heat, but the air grows cooler as you move downhill, toward a squat, unremarkable building tucked between two taller structures. A single torch flickers at its doorway. Nothing about it screams mystery, which is, of course, exactly the point. Inside, the smell changes instantly: stone dust, old water, and the faint metallic temps of rusted hinges. A man in a faded linen tunic nods at you once, then lifts a trap door without a word. You descend a short ladder, your palms brushing rough wood before your feet touch packed earth. The darkness down here feels thicker, as if it's had centuries to practice. Everyone knows that beneath the city lie storage, tunnels, drains, and the occasional shelter for particularly valuable goods or people. What few realize is that some of these tunnels twist into an honest-to-goodness labyrinth, a network so confusing it once trapped an invading general for 2 days before he gave up and climbed out through a drainage channel. Not his most glorious moment, though he probably left that detail out of his victory speeches. You light a small oil lamp, its glow revealing walls lined with uneven bricks. They're cool and slightly damp under your fingertips. The air is dry enough to breathe easily, yet carries the ghost of water, perhaps from the river above, or from the tears of those who took the wrong turn. The passage bends, narrows, then widens into a low chamber with carved niches in the walls. Some hold empty jars, others contain bundles wrapped in linen and bound with twine. You don't open them. This isn't that kind of adventure. Yet historians still debate whether the labyrinth was originally built as a defensive structure, a hidden treasury, or a place for religious initiation. There's even a theory that it doubled as a royal escape route, though one wonders how effective that would be if even locals risked getting lost. You move deeper, and the sound of your footsteps changes, now a soft crunch, now a hollow tap. Somewhere far ahead, you think you hear water dripping, slow and steady, like the heartbeat of the place. Your lamp throws your shadow against the wall, stretching it until it looks like someone taller, someone following. You check behind you, nothing. Still, you walk faster. The path splits. Left is a low arch, right a steep descent. You choose left, ducking your head, and find yourself in a hallway lined with ancient murals. Faded ochre and soot-black shapes suggest processions, battles, maybe even games. One panel shows a line of masked figures holding hands in a circle. Were they dancing, or was this some ritual no one wrote down? The figures' blank eye holes stare at you, unblinking. You decide not to stare back to Long Dot. Further in, the air grows warmer, and you catch a whiff of smoke. It leads you to a chamber, where a small fire burns in a pit, guarded by 2 stone benches and a scattering of clay cups. Clearly, someone still comes here. Perhaps workers maintaining the tunnels, or perhaps people with less official business. You sit for a moment, letting the heat seep into your palms, before moving on. Your next turn is a mistake. You realize it after the 3rd dead end, each wall as blank and stubborn as the last. You trace your steps back, muttering under your breath, imagining the labyrinth, chuckling softly. It's probably been doing this for centuries, outsmarting people who thought they were clever. Eventually you find a set of stairs carved directly into the bedrock. They lead you down into the oldest part of the tunnels, where the walls are rougher, the ceiling lower. Here, the brickwork gives way to bare stone, and the air is still as held breath. The only sound is your own heartbeat, and perhaps the faint scurry of something small, just out of sight. You almost miss the final door. It's no more than a panel of wood flush with the wall, its edges hidden by shadows. Pushing it open reveals a spiral ramp descending into utter blackness. You hesitate, lamp in hand, knowing that once you start down, the city above will vanish entirely. And yet, something pulls you forward: curiosity, stubbornness, or the quiet certainty that the labyrinth hasn't finished with you yet. Step by step, you spiral down, the walls tightening around you like a coiled snake. Your lamp sputters once, twice, before catching again. At the bottom, a wide stone hall stretches into the dark, lined with carved pillars. In the distance, you see movement, just a flicker, gone as soon as you blink. The air smells of dust and old stories. When you finally stop, it's because the hall ends in a blank wall. No door, no tunnel, just cold stone under your palm. But as you press your hand against it, you feel a faint vibration, like something vast moving far beyond. You step back, lamp trembling slightly in your grasp. You don't know whether the labyrinth has let you go, or is simply waiting for you to return. When you finally climb out of the labyrinth's last twisting throat, the first thing you hear is water. Not the polite trickle of a palace fountain, but a steady, hushed roar, as though the city itself has a heartbeat. You follow it through a narrow gap between buildings, the stone still cool under your fingers, until the alley spits you out onto a wide riverbank. The River of Offerings is exactly what it sounds like. A place where people give things to the current and hope it gives something back. Everyone knows the festival day when families gather here with baskets of flowers, honey, and small carved figurines, sending them downstream on little rafts made of reeds. It's equal parts devotion, superstition, and, let's be honest, excuse to gossip with neighbors while pretending to be pious. What most people don't realize is that the river has a secret schedule of its own. At certain points in the year, the current changes ever so slightly, pulling more strongly toward the eastern bank. Old fishermen will tell you this is when the river decides which offerings to keep and which to toss back, sometimes overnight. A boatload of floating gifts will return to shore, soggy but eerily untouched. Nobody likes to be the person whose offering comes back. The river, apparently, is a harsh critic. You step closer to the water, the scent of silt and damp reeds curling up into the air. Torches line the bank, their flames reflected in ripples, making it look like molten gold is flowing right under your feet. Across the water, shadowed figures kneel, murmuring prayers, each voice blending into the next until it's a single low hum. Historians still debate whether this ritual began as a tribute to river spirits, a covert tax system, or a clever way for merchants to smuggle goods without paying customs. Given the number of clay jars filled with spices that have been dredged up over the years, the last theory isn't entirely far-fetched. A boy passes you, carrying a shallow bowl of grain. He wades knee-deep into the river, sets the bowl on the surface, and lets it drift away. You half expect it to tip over instantly, but it glides smoothly, as if guided by an invisible hand. A woman beside you whispers that it's for her brother, lost last winter. She smiles faintly, and for a moment, The air feels thick with a grief that's been neatly folded and tucked away. The river swallows the offering in its slow, relentless flow. You watch until it disappears into darkness, then notice something else moving in the water, a glimmer, small and irregular, like the reflection of a distant star. You crouch, squinting, but it slips beneath the surface before you can make out what it is. Farther upstream, a group of musicians has gathered, their flutes and small drums sending a drifting melody across the water. The rhythm matches the pace of the current, hypnotic in its repetition. You feel your shoulders relax, your breathing slow. Someone behind you laughs a quick, bright sound that doesn't belong in the heavy air, and you turn to see two friends nudging each other, holding a clay figure shaped like a fish. One of them says, "If the river eats this, maybe we'll get better fishing this year." The other replies, "If it spits it back, maybe the fish just don't like you." Offerings and insults, both floating on the same current. A priest in a blue robe approaches, carrying a small brazier. He stops every few steps to scatter powdered resin into the fire, sending up fragrant smoke. The scent, sharp, sweet, a little medicinal, wraps around you, mixing with the river air until you can't quite tell where one ends and the other begins. You take a reed raft from a pile near the bank. It's light in your hands, the stems bound together with twisted fibers. From your pouch, you pull a smooth stone you found earlier in the labyrinth, its surface oddly warm despite the cool night. You place it on the raft, not knowing if this counts as an acceptable offering, and give it a gentle push. The river takes it instantly, spinning it once before pulling it toward the center. The current glitters briefly where your raft passes, as though some submerged eye opened to look at it. Then it's gone. You can't tell if the river has accepted or merely swallowed it. Either way, you've played your part. A bell rings softly upriver, signaling the night's final offerings. People begin to drift away, their voices fading into the hush of the city. You linger a moment longer, watching the torches burn low, and the shadows stretch long over the water. Somewhere beyond the bend, the river carries its secrets toward places you'll never see. When you turn to leave, the path ahead leads you into a quiet market street, its stalls shuttered for the night. But just beyond, you can see lanterns swaying in the wind, marking the entrance to your next destination. The market street you step into is oddly hushed, not the soft, content quiet of a city going to sleep, but the hollow kind where doors are shut a little too tightly and the air tastes faintly of mildew. Lanterns sway on frayed ropes overhead, their paper skins bloated from the damp. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, you hear it, the distant rush of water that's moving where water shouldn't be moving. Everyone knows the flood stories, whole districts swallowed overnight, goats paddling stubbornly against the current, families ferrying their cooking pots on upturned tables. In this city, the flood is as seasonal as the festivals, only with more screaming and fewer flower garlands. But you've arrived in that in-between time, when the waters have just receded and left behind their calling cards. Mud-caked streets, broken timbers, and the kind of smell that makes you rethink your decision to breathe through your nose. What most people don't talk about is the second disaster, the one that comes after the water is gone. Crops ruined, grain stores soaked through, rats thriving like they've just won some rodent lottery. The elders have a phrase for it: the river's mouth never closes. It feeds you in good years and swallows you in bad, and it's never, ever on a diet. You pass a row of empty stalls where baskets of millet once sat. The boards are warped, swollen from the floodwater, and someone has scrawled a desperate message on one beam in charcoal. Next year will be better. The letters are already smudged, as if even the wood is skeptical. Historians still debate whether the cities elaborate. Canal systems were designed purely for irrigation or as a defense against famine. Some argue they were ceremonial, others point to hidden storage chambers built into their walls, places where grain could be kept high and dry. You suspect the truth is all of the above, plus the simple fact that ancient engineers were too clever to waste good bricks. Ahead, a crowd has gathered at the square, where a makeshift soup line snakes across the mud. A giant bronze cauldron bubbles in the center, tended by two women who stir with paddles longer than your arm. The smell is generous. You can't identify half of what's in it, but it's hot and vaguely edible both. High marks in a city where the flood just kissed your pantry goodbye. A boy offers you a clay bowl, chipped but clean. As you wait your turn, you overhear two men arguing about the last big flood. One swears he saw a merchant floating past on a door, shouting prices for the bread he'd saved. The other insists it was just a barrel. Either way, you decide it's proof that capitalism doesn't drown easily. When your bowl is filled, you step aside, cradling it in both hands. The broth scalds your fingers through the clay, and the steam curls up, carrying a smell faintly like river reeds and overcooked lentils. You sip carefully, and it's not good, but it's enough to quiet the hollow ache in your stomach. A man beside you chuckles when he sees your expression. It tastes better when you've been hungry long enough, he says. You can't tell if it's encouragement or a warning dot. As night settles, torches are lit around the square. Musicians appear, not the light-hearted flutists of the river of offerings, but drummers and deep-voiced singers whose rhythms thump low in your bones. They play for no festival, only to remind people they're still here, still breathing, still part of something that hasn't been washed away. An old woman begins handing out small, hard biscuits. You take one. It's dry enough to turn to dust on your tongue, but you eat it anyway. It reminds you of something the labyrinth walls whispered, not in words, but in that strange sense of inevitability. Some trials don't end. They just pause until they have the strength to start again. Across the square, you spot a narrow lane leading uphill, where the ground is less muddy. At the far end, light flickers from an open doorway, and you catch the smell of incense, and clean, like a promise. Somewhere up there, away from the muck, perhaps you'll find the next piece of this city's puzzle. You set down your empty bowl, wipe your hands on your tunic, and start walking toward the glow. The drums fade behind you, replaced by the quiet drip of water from eaves. The flood is gone, but its shadow follows, clinging to the air, waiting for the next turn of the season. The lane leads you to higher ground, where the smell of floodwater fades, and the air feels lighter, though, knowing this city. That could just mean it's scented with something equally suspicious. You follow the flicker of lamplight until the walls open into a courtyard so lush it feels almost insulting after the streets below. Everyone knows the Queen's Garden. It's the postcard of the city, the jewel in its crown, the place you're told to visit if you have only one afternoon and, preferably, a clean pair of shoes. Its terraces overflow with roses in colors that look like they've been stolen from sunsets, vines heavy with purple blossoms, and lilies bobbing on mirror-still ponds. It's the kind of beauty that dares you to believe nothing bad ever happens here, which is a dangerous sort of lie. But what most visitors don't know is that the garden was once a medicinal grove, grown not for beauty but for survival. Tucked among the roses are plants whose leaves can draw out fever, whose roots can calm a troubled stomach, whose seeds, if you're feeling dramatic, can end a life. The Queen's gardeners still tend them in secret corners, pruning them as carefully as the peonies. You're not sure whether that's comforting or alarming. Historians still argue about whether the Queen herself designed the garden's intricate layout, or whether it was the work of an anonymous court architect. Some insist it's a living map of the kingdom, each path representing a river or trade route. Others claim the curves and crossings form coded messages, visible only from the palace balcony. You suspect both might be true, because if you were royalty, you'd definitely hide secret messages in your landscaping. A stone path winds upward, flanked by hedges trimmed to suspiciously perfect shapes. A gardener passes you, bowing slightly before returning to his work with a pair of shears that gleam like surgical tools. You wonder if the roses notice how close they come to amputation. You pass under an archway draped in jasmine. The scent is thick, almost dizzying, and for a moment you imagine what it would be like to spend your days here. No mud, no soup lines, no suspicious broth, just petals, sunlight, and the occasional bee who doesn't understand personal boundaries. Near the garden's center, you find a pavilion with pale silk curtains billowing in the breeze. Inside, cushions are scattered on the floor, and a low table holds an assortment of fruit, figs split open to reveal their jeweled interiors, grapes the size of marbles, and pears so perfectly golden they might be painted. You're tempted, of course, but there's a quiet watchfulness in the air that keeps your hands at your sides. This is not the kind of place where you steal a snack and walk away unnoticed, too. Courtiers in pale robes are speaking in low voices nearby. You catch fragments, still missing the south gate. Not a word to the Queen yet. Their eyes flick toward you once before they drift deeper into the garden. The silk curtains sway back into place, as if to erase them from the scene. You take a seat on the edge of the pavilion and watch the koi drifting lazily in the pond. One of them opens its mouth at you in what could be a silent greeting or a request for food. Either way, it's friendlier than most people you've met today. A faint music rises from somewhere delicate, the kind of sound that makes you think of moonlight. It lures you down another path, this one narrower, lined with statues, whose faces are half hidden by ivy. Some are queens, others warriors, and a few you can't quite identify. You notice that many have their hands outstretched, palms up, as if offering something invisible. At the end of the path stands a locked gate, its ironwork twisting into the shape of flowers you've never seen in the rest of the garden. Beyond it, you glimpse a smaller, wilder space, taller grass, darker water, and trees with bark like silver. You have the sense that this is the real Queen's garden, the one not on any map. You linger there for a moment, your fingers resting on the cool iron before the music fades and a breeze stirs the jasmine again. Somewhere behind you, the courtiers' voices have returned, joined by the sound of hurried footsteps. You decide that perhaps it's time to move on. Stepping back toward the main path, you glance once more at the hidden garden beyond the gate. Whatever secrets it holds, they aren't ready to let you in just yet. But you have the feeling that this city's paths, like its rivers, have a way of looping back when you least expect it. The path from the Queen's garden slopes down again, toward the smell of the river. You follow it almost without thinking, as if some part of you knows you're not done with the water yet. The air cools as you descend, and the city's lights fade behind you, replaced by the slow, glassy gleam of moonlight on the current dot. Everyone knows about the ferrymen. They're the ones who take you across when the main bridges are closed, when floods swallow the lower streets, or when you simply don't want to be seen using the ordinary routes. Cloaked, silent, and paid in coins no one else accepts, they glide over the water like they're part of it. People tell stories of them carrying lovers to secret meetings, fugitives to safety, and less romantically drunks who can't remember which side of the river they live on. What most people don't know is that these shadow ferrymen keep a private map of the River One that changes every night. They mark not just the safe channels and hidden docks, but the invisible currents that can pull a boat somewhere, unintended. If you ask them where the map is kept, they'll just smile and tell you you've already seen it. That's the unnerving part. You have no idea whether they're joking. Historians still debate whether the ferrymen began as a royal courier service or as smugglers who eventually learned to behave. Some argue both could be true after all. Who better to trust with a crown's secrets than someone who can disappear into the mist at will? And who better to move contraband than someone already paid to travel at night? A shadow peels itself from the dock as you approach a figure in a dark cloak, face hidden beneath a hood. No words are exchanged. They tilt their head toward the boat, and you step aboard. The wood shifts beneath your feet, the smell of pitch and damp rope filling your lungs. The ferryman pushes off with a long pole, and the boat glides into the current. The only sounds are the soft slap of water against the hull and the faint creak of wood. The city shrinks into a line of lantern lights, then disappears entirely. You pass under the silhouette of the old bridge, its arches black against the stars. Somewhere above, you imagine rats scampering between loose stones and a pair of guards bored enough to invent card games you'd never understand. The ferryman changes course without warning, steering into a narrow channel where the banks rise, steeply, lined with drooping willows. Their branches trail in the water like fingers testing its depth. The air feels heavier here, as if you've stepped out of time at one bend. You glimpse another boat low dark, and carrying a single passenger who doesn't look up. The two vessels pass silently, their wakes crossing like whispered secrets. You have the uneasy sense that if you spoke aloud now, your voice would be taken from you and added to the river's collection. Halfway through, the ferryman pauses. They dip one hand into the water and lift it, letting droplets fall back in a slow rhythm. It could be nothing, just testing the current, but you remember the private maps and wonder if this is how they're drawn, in patterns no paper could hold. Almost there, the ferryman says at last, voice low and rough, like it's been unused for hours or years. It's the first thing they've said, and it makes you realize how much you've been holding your breath. The boat eases into a hidden dock, just a shadow between two reed beds. You step off, and when you look back, the ferryman is already pushing away, vanishing into the darkness without a sound. On the bank, a narrow path leads upward, toward the faint glow of torches. You take it, knowing without knowing why that the river has delivered you exactly where you were meant to be. The narrow path from the hidden dock snakes upward until it spills you onto a stretch of open ground. The smell of the river still lingers on your clothes, but now it's mingling with the sharper scent of scorched wood and iron left too long in the sun. Ahead, the remnants of the outer walls stand jagged and blackened, like a row of teeth broken mid-bite. You've arrived at one of the old siege lines, a place where the city once faced enemies patient enough to wait, and cruel enough to get creative. Everyone knows the familiar rhythm of a siege, surround the city, cut off supplies, wait for hunger and fear to finish what the battering rams cannot. You picture soldiers camped in a ring beyond bowshot, their fires flickering each night, their catapults parked like lazy beasts. What most people don't know is that here the attackers had a particularly nasty idea. They tried to poison the city's hidden rivers, the veins beneath its skin. Slow trickles of nightshade, bitter roots, and even powdered metal found their way into the inlets. The poisoners worked quietly, knowing it might take weeks before anyone noticed. Historians still debate whether the plot was discovered by accident or by the work of spies. Some say a fisherman caught a river eel with strange red blotches and brought it to the palace kitchens. Others believe a traitor confessed at the last minute, eager to trade betrayal for a shorter rope. Either way, the water gates were slammed, shut in time, starving the invaders of their victory. The ferryman's role in that moment is whispered about but never confirmed. A few stories claim they smuggled pure water from distant springs in the dead of night, slipping through enemy lines, like shadows. Other stories, well, they insist the ferryman didn't carry water at all, but something less noble like barrels of fermented pear liquor to lift the spirits of the city's garrison. In fairness, morale is important too. Walking along the old siege trench, you imagine the days when this ground was crawling with enemy sappers, the kind who dig tunnels beneath the walls to collapse them. You spot one of the collapsed shafts, black mouth in the earth, bristling with weeds. It feels like it's breathing, though you tell yourself that's just the wind. A few paces on, you see the remains of a sabotaged aqueduct. Its once proud arch lies in pieces, moss growing between the cracks. Touching the stone, you feel how cold it still is, as if it's holding on to the memory of the river it once carried from the ridge. The city looks peaceful again, its towers gilded in late light. But you know better now. Peace here isn't the absence of danger, it's the space between its many shapes. You descend toward the inner walls, where the torchlight begins to gather, and the sound of slow, deliberate bells carries on the air. It's not a warning, not a celebration, just the tower of silent bells, reminding the city that someone is always listening. You follow the bells only part way, then slip down a narrow side street where the air cools with each step. The cobbles here are slick with moss, as if the street itself sweats in the dark. Ahead, an archway yawns low, carved with symbols so worn they're more suggestion than stone. You duck inside, and the sound of the city mutes, replaced by the steady drip of water. Everyone knows catacombs are meant for the quiet dead, tidy rows of niches, labeled stones, maybe the occasional rat with delusions of grandeur. But here, the catacombs never stayed dry. Long ago, a sudden breach from the river above sent a black tide roaring through these halls. Whole chambers filled in minutes. Torches sputtered out, prayers dissolved mid-word, and the water rose until the ceiling vanished beneath it. The lesser-known fact: the flooding didn't stop at the burial chambers. It crept into the ossuary archives where records of the city's oldest families were kept. Paper turned to pulp, seals floated away, and the history of hundreds of names simply melted. It's one of the reasons the city's genealogists always look faintly suspicious of anyone claiming noble blood. After all, if no one can prove you aren't descended from a duke, why ruin the fun? Historians still argue over what caused the breach. Some insist the river's wall was weakened by careless quarrying. Others blame saboteurs tunneling too close. A more romantic version claims that a grieving widow, forbidden to visit her husband's tomb, broke the sluice gates in a moment of fury, though admittedly, that's quite a leap from mildly upset. You walk deeper, the light from your lantern catching glints on the walls. At first, you think it's crystal, but no, it's salt, left behind where the water once sat for months. Touch it, and it flakes away, like memory turning to dust. In the half-submerged lower halls, water still laps against the stone, black and cold as ink. Something moves beneath the surface. A fish, perhaps, or just the echo of your own steps. Legend says the ferryman once guided survivors through these drowned corridors, poles scraping the ceiling as they pushed their narrow boats along. Supposedly, they even ferried candles to families who wanted to float them on the water, each tiny flame a stubborn refusal to be extinguished. You can almost picture a troves of lanterns bobbing gently, their reflections shivering on the vaults above. Still, the air here is heavy, as if it remembers how fast everything can vanish. You wonder how many other parts of the city are one cracked wall away from turning into an underwater tomb. The thought makes you smile, not because it's comforting, but because it's just so very on brand for this place. The passage ahead narrows until you have to crouch, wading ankle deep. The ceiling drips with condensation, and a faint current tugs at your legs. Somewhere ahead, there's another exit up into the open air, perhaps into one of the palace courtyards. Or, if your luck runs true to form, into the one place drier than this, but no less unsettling. The Queen's Menagerie. You emerge from the damp throat of the catacombs into a quieter street, where the air smells faintly of river mist. Somewhere ahead, the water speaks not in a rush or roar, but in a low, rippling murmur, as if the river is telling secrets to the stones along its banks. You follow the sound until you find yourself on a narrow quay, moonlight laying silver threads across the surface. Everyone knows rivers can be like floods, rapids, the kind of current that sweeps away carts, markets, and your favorite sandal. But here, the water moves differently. Ancient poems claimed the city's rivers were alive, able to whisper to those who leaned close enough. Some swore they heard warnings before a siege, or lullabies that could put a crying child to sleep, before the mother had even reached for her arms. You wonder how much is poetry, and how much is just the human tendency to romanticize anything that might otherwise be trying to drown you. The lesser-known truth is that court musicians once came here at night to tune their instruments. To the river, they believed the water carried a pitch no human voice could sustain, a perfect note born from the meeting of underground springs and moonlit air. Some claimed this was why the palace orchestras always sounded slightly more otherworldly than those of neighboring cities. Or maybe they were just better paid. Historians still debate whether the so-called songs were real phenomena or simply the mingling of wind, water, and overactive imagination. One school of thought insists that the sound was caused by hidden stone flutes built into the quay's foundations, a sort of accidental river organ. Another argues it was all in the listeners' heads, perhaps after one cup too many of the local fortified wine. You sit on the edge, letting your feet dangle just above the water. The ripples catch the light in such a way that you could almost believe the river is indeed alive, shifting, breathing, even glancing up at you when it thinks you're not looking. Somewhere in the dark, a low hum curls around the edges of your hearing. It's not melody exactly, more like a pulse, steady and patient. You imagine it's the same sound heard by night guards, by poets clutching damp parchment, by lovers sneaking away from feasts to listen together in the shadows. A little ways upriver, you spot a stone platform jutting from the quay. Old carvings of water, birds and reeds circle its edges. If the stories are true, this was where the annual Night of the Rivers began, an event everyone remembers. Lanterns set afloat, poems recited to the current, the occasional drunk trying to declaim in rhyme and ending up half submerged. The ceremony was meant to honor the water for its life-giving gift, and possibly to bribe it into not flooding the grain stores that year. The river hums again, and this time you can almost make out words, not quite in your language, not quite in any language, but enough to make your chest tighten. Maybe it's asking you to listen more closely. Maybe it's telling you to run. You lean closer, so close your breath dimples the surface, and for a moment you swear you hear laughter, soft, distant, and utterly amused at your expense. The sound fades as the current carries it downstream, toward the palace gardens where streams vanish under the hedges, feeding hidden fountains. You follow, the night air clinging cool to your skin, until the river's song is replaced by a different kind of voice entirely. The restless murmurs of the Queen's menagerie. You leave the quay, still carrying in your ears the faint echo of the river's hum. But as you wander further into the old quarter, the sound thins, then fades entirely until there is nothing but silence. The cobblestones slope down toward a channel carved deep into the ground, lined with worn stone walls, and archways that lead nowhere. No water moves here. Just dust, scattered leaves, and the occasional pigeon who looks as confused about the situation as you are. Everyone knows rivers can dry up, droughts, changing climate, the slow shift of underground springs. But here, the vanishing wasn't gradual enough to be boring. The city's chronicles speak of one particularly bad decade when the hidden rivers simply stopped coming. Markets emptied, fountains sputtered, and suddenly everyone cared very much about where their water came from. The lesser-known truth is that a secret council once debated whether to fake the river's return. The plan was, as absurd as it sounds, hire laborers to haul barrels of water at night and pour them into the channels, so that by morning the citizens would believe the underground miracle had been restored. The idea was abandoned when someone pointed out that hauling hundreds of barrels of water underground every day was not only suspicious, but also incredibly exhausting. Historians still debate whether the disappearance was caused by natural shifts in geology or by centuries of human meddling, overbuilding, tunneling, diverting streams to fill ornamental fish ponds instead of grain cisterns. Some even suggest the rivers withdrew deliberately, as if the city had offended them one time too many. It's the kind of theory you'd laugh at until you remember how the water once hummed like a living thing. You walk along the dry bed, your footsteps echoing in a way water never would have allowed. Moss still clings to the lower stones, a ghostly watermark from better days. In places, carvings of fish and waves remain, now crusted over with dust. Like punchlines no one remembers. There's a common story locals tell to tourists, that if you sleep down here on a night when the moon is thin and the air is heavy, you'll wake to find water flowing once more, cool, clear, and entirely real until the first rooster crows. No one admits to trying it, though you suspect a few people have, and possibly woke up wetter than they intended, thanks to pranksters with buckets at a bend in the channel. The stones give way to packed earth. Roots twist down into the emptiness, seeking moisture that's no longer there. You crouch to touch the dry soil, half expecting it to pulse with some secret remnant of the current. But it doesn't even bother pretending. Further ahead, The dry bed ends at a sealed archway, once a tunnel mouth. The bricks are newer than the rest, their mortars still holding strong. You imagine the day they walled it, upworkers wiping sweat from their brows, perhaps pausing a moment before the last brick went in, wondering if they were burying more than just a passage. The silence here feels heavier than before, as if the air remembers sound but chooses not to share it. Your mind drifts to the next place. The old maps mark a chamber where the city's last drop of river water was supposedly stored. Some say it's still there, in a sealed cistern, kept for a day of true desperation. Others insist it evaporated centuries ago, leaving only the idea of water behind. Either way, you can't help but wonder, if the rivers could vanish so completely, could they also return? And if they did, would they forgive? You turn from the archway, the dust settling slowly behind you, and follow the narrow stairs upward toward that final chamber, and the quietest secret of all. The steps bring you into a small, cool chamber, the air scented faintly of stone and something older like the echo of rain. In the center stands the cistern you've heard whispers about, its lid sealed with iron bands, the metal darkened with centuries. You stand there a moment, listening, wondering if you might catch the sound of water breathing inside. Of course, you hear nothing. Water is notoriously shy around strangers. Everyone knows the feeling of lying in bed at night, listening to the hum of the city or the distant rush of a river. Here, in this sealed chamber, it's almost the same. The hum is memory, and the river is a rumor. The lesser-known fact, when the last drop was supposedly placed inside this cistern, the city elders held a ceremony. They dressed in white, carried lanterns, and spoke in a language even they didn't fully understand, because tradition often requires more confidence than comprehension. Afterward, they locked the cistern and swore an oath never to open it, unless the city was dying of thirst. Conveniently, no one defined exactly what dying meant. Historians still debate whether this cistern was ever truly filled, or if it was a symbolic gesture to comfort a nervous population. Some say it's empty stone, others believe it holds a small pool of impossibly clear water, perfectly preserved. And then there are the ones who think it contains nothing at all, just air thick with hope. You sit on the low steps beside it. The walls here seem to lean in, a gentle curve that makes the space feel like a cradle. Your breathing slows. You picture the hidden rivers below, not gone but merely sleeping, curling around the roots of the city like silver threads. Somewhere above, night drapes over the rooftops. You imagine walking home through the quiet streets, slipping into your bed and letting your mind drift down again past the paving stones, past the sealed arches, into the deep, cool dark where the water still hums. And as your eyes grow heavier, you realize the city's heartbeat isn't only in its people or its walls, it's in the rivers you cannot see, the ones that refuse to be forgotten, even when silent. The chamber fades, as if the lamplight withdraws into the walls. You're no longer sitting on the step. You're floating, slow and steady, through corridors carved of stone. The air is cool against your skin, and the shadows move like long, soft ribbons. Somewhere far below, there's a glimmer like moonlight caught in a bowl of glass. You drift closer, and the glimmer resolves into a quiet pool. The surface is unbroken, so clear it seems like air, so still you almost feel guilty for noticing it. You lower your hand, and the water accepts your reflection without question. The ripples reach outward, and for a moment you hear a sound, not rushing, not roaring, but a low, contented hum. Like a lullaby, the earth has been singing to itself since before you were born. It carries you along without moving you, wraps around you without touching. Your breath matches it, slow in, slow out. The stone walls soften, the edges blur, and the light above fades into a muted glow. Like candlelight behind a closed door, every thought you meant to keep fades gently away. The questions, the half-remembered maps, the guesses about where the water went, they all sink into the dark, where they are cushioned and quiet. The water will keep them for you. You don't have to carry them now. The hum grows softer still, until it's only the memory of sound. The pool recedes, or perhaps you do, rising back toward the surface where sleep waits. The stone gives way to air, the air to a weightless calm. You are still, you are warm, and beneath everything, you are safe. The rivers are still there. They always will be. Sleep now. The water will wait. End of script. Sweet dreams.